Alex thought he understood love, until the night Emma looked him straight in the eye and told him she was becoming a sugar baby because he couldn't provide the life she deserved. The words hit him like a punch, but the real shock came later, when he opened his emergency fund and found $30,000 missing. His mind raced as every transaction pointed directly to her. The woman he trusted, the woman he planned a future with, had drained his savings without hesitation. That moment marked the end of innocence and the beginning of something darker. Alex realized he wasn't dealing with heartbreak, he was dealing with deception. And the deeper he looked, the more the truth clawed its way to the surface. Alex did confront Emma right away. Instead, he let silence become his shield and suspicion become his guide. He spent that night staring at the ceiling, replaying every strange moment from the past few months, her sudden shopping sprees, the expensive perfumes she claimed were gifts, and the late-night messages she always hid when he walked into the room. Everything that once felt harmless now looked like warning signs he had ignored. The next morning, he made a decision he never imagined he would have to make. He was going to investigate his own girlfriend. He began by combing through bank statements, listing every withdrawal he didn't recognize. The pattern was too perfect to be accidental. It wasn't impulsive spending. It was systematic, purposeful, calculated. But Alex knew simple numbers wouldn't be enough. If Emma was really involved with sugar dadding, she wouldn't fall for a basic trap. He needed to think smarter, think like someone she would never suspect. So he built an entire universe of digital identities. He used AI tools to generate 8 separate sugar daddy personas with different ages, backgrounds, accents, and personalities. One was a retired Italian businessman. Another was a venture capitalist from Seattle. One claimed to be a widower looking for companionship. Each had detailed backstories, social media footprints, and profile photos polished enough to look real but not famous. Alex released them into the same platforms Emma used. He didn't expect immediate results. But within 48 hours, something happened that made his stomach twist. Emma responded to not just 1 or 2 of the accounts, she responded to all 8. And she flirted with each one, as if she had endless time and no conscience. Every message gave Alex more information. She bragged about living comfortably, hinted that she had a devoted boyfriend who didn't need to know, and even admitted she preferred men who didn't ask questions. Through her conversations, he traced her spending habits to specific luxury stores, restaurants, and boutique hotels, places she never visited with him. Everything she flaunted came from the money she had siphoned from his account. Alex saved every screenshot, every timestamp, and every conversation log. He created folders labeled by date, location, and digital persona. What started as a desperate attempt to understand the truth slowly transformed into a full-scale investigation. But it wasn't just betrayal he uncovered. Emma had a routine. She asked each sugar daddy for small trial gifts to prove they were serious, Uber rides, deposits just to test trust, and little pamper-me purchases. Her tactic was the same every time, a practiced cycle she repeated without remorse. Alex realized she wasn't just manipulating him in their relationship. She was manipulating everyone. By the end of the week, he had enough evidence to see the truth clearly. The woman he loved had been lying to him long before the money disappeared. She had perfected her game, and he had never stood a chance, until now. Because this time, she wasn't the only one playing. Alex knew gathering evidence wasn't enough. If he wanted the truth to stick, he needed to catch Emma in a situation she couldn't lie her way out of. He spent 2 days crafting the perfect scenario, choosing the most believable of his fake personas, Alejandro, the wealthy South American hotel investor with a taste for luxury. Alejandro was charming, mysterious, and generous, the exact type of man Emma couldn't resist. Alex set up the trap at the Ritz Carlton, a place Emma had always drooled over but could never afford on her own. He booked a suite under the fake persona, using prepaid cards and burner numbers to avoid any trace back to him. He coordinated with local police, presenting the evidence he had collected, the timestamps, the digital trails, the stolen money. They agreed to stand by nearby, ready to intervene once the moment arrived. All Alex had to do was make sure Emma showed up. He crafted a carefully worded message through Alejandro's account, inviting her to a night of champagne and possibilities. Emma responded within minutes, sending heart emojis and even a selfie in the mirror, wearing a designer dress Alex had never seen before. The plan was unfolding exactly as he predicted. But watching her enthusiasm crushed him more than he expected. He realized she had never hesitated, never questioned the sudden affection from an older, wealthy stranger. She was ready to go the moment money was involved. The evening of the setup, Alex waited in the lobby with a hood pulled low, hidden behind a newspaper. His heart pounded as he watched the revolving door spin. Then she appeared. Emma walked in with the confidence of someone who believed the world belonged to her. She carried a handbag he knew cost nearly $2,000, paid for with the stolen funds. Her wrists sparkled with bracelets he recognized from the receipts he had traced. She approached the front desk, asking for Alejandro's room. But instead of going up, she lingered in the lobby, taking pictures, adjusting her outfit, checking her makeup and her phone's reflection. Alex took in every second of it, feeling a mix of anger and disgust. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't conflicted. She was excited. That realization carved a deeper wound than any missing money ever could. Minutes later, a hotel staff member approached her, pretending to deliver a message from Alejandro. It was the signal Alex had coordinated. Emma smiled, ready for whatever fantasy she believed was waiting upstairs. But before she could take a step, the officers moved in. They surrounded her with quiet precision, identifying themselves discreetly to avoid causing a scene. Emma froze, confusion splashing across her face before panic took over. Alex watched from a distance as the reality settled in. She wasn't meeting a wealthy stranger. She was walking straight into the truth she had been running from. And as the officers guided her aside for questioning, Emma finally realized the game she had been playing had ended, because she was no longer the hunter. She was the one caught. Emma's confusion didn't last long. The officers led her to a quiet corner of the lobby, away from wandering eyes, and asked for identification. Her hands trembled as she opened her purse, but the fear wasn't from the officers. It was from the sinking realization that something had gone terribly wrong. She scanned the lobby, searching for Alejandro, the man she believed had invited her. But there was no sign of him. Only shadows, and a silence that grew heavier with every passing second. One of the detectives placed a folder on the table between them. Inside were printed screenshots, bank statements, and photos from the stores where she had made purchases using the stolen money. Emma's face turned pale as the detective flipped through the pages, listing every item she bought with the marked bills, describing each location she had visited, and recounting every transaction tied back to Alex's missing funds. The evidence wasn't speculative. It was precise, methodical, undeniable. When they mentioned the exact amount, $30,000, Emma tried to speak, but her voice cracked. She attempted excuses, claiming Alex had given her permission, claiming she had planned to return the money, claiming she had mixed up accounts. But every lie collapsed as quickly as it left her mouth. The detectives had already verified Alex's bank records and traced the digital fingerprints linking her devices to the transfers. The more she talked, the worse she made it. Then came the final blow. The officers presented documents showing she had used Alex's identity to apply for a lease on a separate apartment, the place where she met her other clients. Forgery, identity fraud, unauthorized access to a financial account. The charges stacked higher with each passing moment, forming a wall she could no longer climb over. Emma's breath turned shallow as reality pressed down on her. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a lover's quarrel. This was a criminal investigation, and she was standing at the center of it. When the officers finally stood and informed her she was under arrest for theft and fraud, she shook her head violently, as if refusing to accept the words. But denial didn't matter. Cold metal cuffs clicked around her wrists, and the sound echoed louder than anything else in the lobby. Hotel guests turned their heads, whispers spreading as Emma tried to cover her face with her shoulder. Her confidence, her entitlement, her arrogance, everything drained out of her as she realized she had lost control completely. As she was escorted toward the exit, Emma made one last attempt to twist the narrative, insisting she was being set up, insisting someone had hacked her accounts, insisting Alex was trying to ruin her out of jealousy. But the detectives didn't react. They had heard it all before. Outside, a patrol car waited with its back door open. Emma paused, looking around frantically, still expecting Alejandro to appear and save her. But he didn't exist. He never had. Behind a tinted window across the street, Alex watched silently, feeling no triumph in the moment, only a quiet, heavy closure. The truth had surfaced, and for the first time, Emma had no place left to hide. News of Emma's arrest spread faster than Alex expected. Within hours, her family and close friends began calling him, flooding his phone with accusations. They claimed he had overreacted, that he should have handled the situation privately, that involving the police was cruel and vindictive. Some even insisted Emma must have been framed, because she would never do something like that. Alex listened in silence, realizing that their loyalty to her was built on the same lies she had used to manipulate him. They didn't want the truth. They wanted someone to blame. But the backlash didn't stop there. Emma's sister left him long voicemails, calling him a monster. Her mother wrote paragraphs of messages, claiming he had ruined Emma's life out of spite. A few of her friends posted vague, passive-aggressive comments online about men who can't handle strong women. Alex ignored all of it. He knew that none of them had seen the evidence, and even if they did, some would still refuse to believe Emma was at fault. People protect the illusions they love, even when they're built on fraud. Then the calls from the jail began. At first, Emma sounded desperate, her voice shaking as she begged him to intervene. She insisted it was all a misunderstanding, that she had been confused, that she panicked. When he didn't respond the way she wanted, her tone shifted. She became aggressive, claiming he owed her support because of their relationship. She said the money wasn't that big of a deal, that he had overreacted, that he had humiliated her. The third call was worse. Emma accused him of emotional abuse, insisting she would tell the police he had manipulated her into doing everything. She said she could make people believe he pressured her, that she had felt unsafe, that he was controlling. Her voice was sharp, poisonous, fueled by the fatting sense of power she once held. Alex recorded every message and forwarded the threats to the detectives working on the case. They told him to block her calls if it became too overwhelming. But he kept the line open, not out of sympathy, but out of a need to understand who she truly was when stripped of excuses. Each call revealed a new side of her: desperation, anger, denial, and finally, delusion. Emma claimed she was being targeted because she was too beautiful, that other women were jealous, that men she rejected were trying to destroy her reputation. She painted herself as a victim so convincingly that Alex could almost understand how she had manipulated so many people for so long. Yet none of her theatrics mattered. The evidence was airtight, the money was traceable, and the detectives had already documented her attempts to shift blame. Her words only tightened the noose around her case. She didn't realize it, but every threat she made became another recorded confession. By the end of the week, the calls dwindled. Emma, finally, understood that nothing she said could undo what she had done. Alex felt a strange calm settle over him. For the first time in months, He wasn't second-guessing himself, wasn't wondering what Emma was hiding, wasn't living in the fog of confusion she created. The chaos she left behind was still loud, but her voice no longer held the power to shake him. In the days that followed Emma's arrest, Alex expected the investigation to slow down. Instead, it accelerated. Detectives contacted him repeatedly, requesting clarifications, timestamps, and bank details. At first, he thought they were simply being thorough, but the tone of their questions hinted at something bigger. They weren't only interested in Emma's theft from him. They were looking for patterns. A week later, one of the detectives called Alex into the station. He was led into a small conference room where a stack of folders sat waiting on the table. The detective opened the first one and revealed a profile of a man Alex had never seen before. It showed screenshots of messages, bank transfers, and receipts, transactions eerily similar to the ones Emma had made with his stolen money. Then came another folder, and another, and another. By the time the detective finished stacking them, there were 23 profiles laid out. 23 different men. 23 versions of the same story. Emma hadn't been running one con. She had been running an entire operation. Each man believed he was supporting her through rough times, paying for emergencies, helping cover unexpected bills, or sending money to prove trust. And each one had transferred amounts ranging from a few $100s to several thousand. The total exceeded $50,000. Alex sat frozen as the detective explained how the pieces fit together. Emma had used multiple phones, multiple email addresses, and a rotation of dating profiles to avoid detection. She kept each man isolated, never letting them interact or compare timelines. Her manipulation was calculated, not impulsive. She was running a system, a cold, organized pattern of emotional and financial exploitation. Then came the part Alex didn't expect. Some of the victims lived in different states, and the money transfers crossed state lines. That changed everything legally. The detective explained that once a fraud operation crossed state borders, the case was no longer handled as a simple local crime. It shifted into federal territory, which meant the FBI had already been briefed. They wanted the digital evidence Alex had collected and were preparing to open a separate case focusing on interstate wire fraud. Alex felt the room grow smaller as the weight of it hit him. He had thought Emma's betrayal was personal, a private nightmare between the two of them. He had no idea he had been one thread in a much larger web. A web she had woven with precision, charm, and complete disregard for anyone she hurt. The detective pushed a final folder toward him. Inside was a timeline of Emma's activity over the past year. Travel receipts, hotel bookings, cash deposits, fake names she used, and notes from victims who had come forward after hearing about her arrest. Alex realized she had been living a double life long before she ever met him. He hadn't been the beginning of her lies. He had only been her most convenient target at the time. Leaving the station, Alex felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The truth was uglier than he imagined, but it also freed him from the doubt that had lingered in his chest. Emma hadn't deceived him because he was weak or naive. She had deceived him because deceit was what she did best. And now, for the first time, the world was beginning to see her for who she truly was. The courthouse was packed on the morning of Emma's trial. Reporters lingered outside, murmuring about the sudden rise of a multi-state romance fraudster, while victims sat quietly in the gallery, each carrying their own version of the same wound. Alex took a seat near the back, wanting to witness the truth unfold, but refusing to place himself at the center of it. He had already lived through enough chaos. Now he only wanted closure. When Emma entered the courtroom, her posture was stiff but calculated. She wore minimal makeup, a plain blouse, and an expression crafted to evoke sympathy. To someone who didn't know her, she might have looked fragile, even misunderstood. But Alex saw the same rehearsed innocence she used whenever she wanted something. Her eyes scanned the room, lingering on the male jurors a second longer than necessary. Even in handcuffs, she was trying to charm her way out. The prosecution presented their case methodically. They began with the theft from Alex, laying out the timeline of missing funds, the marked bills she spent, and the forged apartment lease. Screenshots from her sugar daddy conversations flashed on the screen, each message exposing the pattern she had repeated again and again. Then came testimony from the other victims. 23 men, each describing the exact same tactics: manufactured emergencies, emotional manipulation, strategic affection, and sudden requests for money. The amounts varied, but the story never did. As the evidence piled up, Emma's performance began to crack. She shifted in her seat, crossed and uncrossed her legs, tapped her fingers on the table as if she could claw her way out of reality. Her lawyer attempted to portray her as a traumatized young woman taken advantage of by older men, but the prosecution swiftly dismantled that narrative by presenting her digital records. Timestamps, banking logs, text messages, travel receipts. Every detail showed she had orchestrated the scheme with absolute intention. When Emma finally took the stand, she tried to cry. She spoke about growing up insecure, about feeling pressured, about seeking affection in the wrong places. Her voice trembled, but the judge remained unmoved. The jury didn't flinch. They had seen too much to believe the tears she weaponized so easily. Her attempt to blame Alex fell apart instantly when recordings of her threatening him from jail were played aloud. The courtroom fell silent as her own voice echoed through the speakers, angry, manipulative, unhinged. By the time closing arguments ended, the outcome felt inevitable. After only 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty on all counts. Fraud, identity theft, wire fraud crossing state lines, financial exploitation. The list was long and damning. The judge sentenced her to 4 years in state prison, along with mandatory restitution of $80,000, followed by a separate sentence for the federal wire fraud charges that would run concurrently. Emma's face twisted in disbelief, as if she genuinely couldn't comprehend why the world refused to believe her version of events. As she was led away, she turned her head, searching the courtroom for someone to save her. But no one moved. Not her friends. Not her family. Not the men she once manipulated. And certainly not Alex. He walked out of the courthouse with a steady breath, feeling no triumph, only release. The chapter was finally ending. Emma's lies had carried her far, but not far enough to escape the truth waiting on the other side of justice. Alex stepped out of the courthouse and felt something he hadn't felt in months, air that didn't weigh on his chest. The chaos, the confusion, the questions that once kept him awake at night finally began to fade. He settled back into his routine, rebuilding the parts of his life Emma had drained. With time, he recovered a portion of the stolen money, enough to stabilize himself again. He also met someone new, a kind-hearted elementary school teacher named Rachel, whose warmth felt nothing like the manipulation he had endured. Slowly, the world stopped feeling like a battlefield.